There are places on the internet where loneliness goes to feed on itself. Message boards that exist in the forgotten corners of the web, where people gather at 3 in the morning not because they want to, but because sleep won't come and the silence of their rooms has become unbearable. Sarah found one of these places on a Tuesday night in late October. She'd been scrolling through her phone for hours, that mindless kind of scrolling where you're not really looking at anything, just trying to fill the emptiness. Her apartment was too quiet. It had been too quiet for months now, ever since her roommate moved out, ever since the breakup, ever since her life had shrunk down to just her, four walls, and the cold glow of a screen. The forum was called Nidals Anonymous. Nothing special. Just another dead-end corner of the internet where insomniacs and the desperately bored traded stories and small talk. Sarah created an account without thinking much about it. Username: SarahM_92. Simple. Easy. She posted a single message in the general chat. Can't sleep. Anyone else awake? The response came within seconds. Always awake. Sleep is overrated anyway. The username was just a string of numbers. User_4947. No profile picture. No post history she could see. But at 3:15 in the morning, Sarah wasn't picky about conversation partners. They talked about nothing at first. The weather. How the city felt different at night. The kind of shallow exchange you have with a stranger when you're both just killing time. But there was something comfortable about it. Easy. Like talking to someone who already understood the specific flavor of loneliness that kept you up at night. Then user_4947 asked a question that made Sarah pause. Do you ever feel like you're being watched? Like even when you're alone, you're not really alone? Sarah stared at her phone. It was an odd thing to ask, but not threatening. Not yet. Sometimes, she typed back. Especially at night. Like right now. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Something about the question felt different. More pointed. What do you mean? Do you feel it right now? In your apartment? Sarah's stomach tightened. She glanced around her living room. The curtains were drawn. The door was locked. She was alone. She had to be alone. How do you know I'm in an apartment? She typed. The reply came fast. Lucky guess. Most people our age live in apartments. Nothing weird about that. Our age. Sarah hadn't mentioned her age. The username had her birth year in it, sure, but that felt like a detail someone would have to be paying attention to notice. She told herself she was being paranoid. It was late. Her mind was playing tricks. They kept talking. User_4947 seemed normal enough after that. Funny even. They talked about music, about the worst jobs they'd ever had, about the strange intimacy of talking to a stranger you'd never meet. Sarah started to relax again. Then he said something that made her blood run cold. Your window overlooks the parking lot, doesn't it? That must be nice. You can see everyone coming and going. Sarah's apartment was on the second floor. Her living room window did overlook the parking lot. But she'd never mentioned that. Never even hinted at it. How do you know that? She typed, her hands shaking now. You told me. No, I didn't. You must have. How else would I know? Sarah scrolled back through their entire conversation. She read every message twice. She had never mentioned her window. Never described her apartment. Never given any details that would tell this stranger where she lived or what she could see. I didn't tell you that, she wrote. I need you to explain how you know that. There was a pause. Longer than the others. Sarah watched the screen, her heart hammering in her chest. Then the typing indicator appeared. I can see you right now, Sarah. You're wearing that gray sweatshirt. The one with the coffee stain on the sleeve. You really should get that cleaned. Sarah looked down. She was wearing a gray sweatshirt. There was a coffee stain on the left sleeve from yesterday morning. She'd forgotten about it. Her whole body went numb. She stood up fast, nearly dropping her phone. Her eyes went to the window. The curtains were closed, but not completely. There was a gap, maybe 6 inches. Just enough for someone outside to see in if they were standing in the right spot. She ran to the window and yanked the curtains shut, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Then she grabbed her phone again. Who are you? She typed. How are you doing this? The response was immediate. We've been talking for weeks, Sarah. Don't you remember? Weeks? They'd been talking for less than an hour. Sarah's hands were shaking so badly she could barely type. This is our first conversation. I just joined this forum tonight. No. We've talked before. You just don't remember. But I remember everything. I remember the night you told me about your sister. The one you don't talk to anymore. I remember when you cried about your ex. I remember it all. Sarah had a sister. They hadn't spoken in 2 years. And her ex, she'd spent nights crying over him, but never online. Never where anyone could see. You're lying, she typed. You're trying to scare me. I'm not lying. Check your message history. It's all there. Sarah didn't want to check. Every instinct in her body told her not to. But she did anyway. She opened her account settings, went to her message history, and scrolled back. The messages were there. Dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. Conversations with user_4947 going back weeks. Months. She read them in horror, her eyes scanning fragments of things she'd never written but somehow existed on the screen in front of her. Messages where she talked about her sister. About her job. About the coffee shop on the corner where she went every morning. About the nightmare she had where she was drowning. She'd never written any of it. She was certain. But it was all there in her own words under her own username. Her phone buzzed with a new message. You see? We've been friends for a long time, Sarah. I know you better than anyone. She dropped the phone like it had burned her. It clattered onto the floor, screen up, still glowing. She backed away from it, her mind racing. This wasn't possible. None of this was possible. Then she heard it. A sound. Soft. Deliberate. A knock. 3 taps on her apartment door. Sarah froze. She stared at the door from across the room, her whole body trembling. No one knocked on her door at 3:30 in the morning. No one even knew where she lived except. Her phone buzzed again on the floor. She didn't want to look, but she couldn't stop herself. She bent down, picked it up, and read the message. I thought it was time we finally met in person. After all this time talking, don't you think we should see each other face to face? Another knock. Louder this time. Sarah's throat closed up. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. She looked at the door, then at her phone, then back at the door. I know you're scared, the next message read. But you don't have to be. I've been watching over you this whole time. Keeping you safe. Keeping you company. You're not alone anymore, Sarah. You'll never be alone again. The knocking stopped. And then, from just outside her door, she heard a voice. A real voice. Calm. Familiar. Like someone she'd known her entire life. Sarah, the voice said softly. It's me. Open the door. She didn't recognize the voice, but somehow it felt like she should. Like it belonged to someone she'd spoken to 1,000 times before. Someone she'd trusted. Her hand moved toward the doorknob before she even realized what she was doing. Then her phone buzzed one last time. She looked down. The message was just one sentence. Thank you for finally letting me in. Sarah's hand was on the doorknob. She didn't remember putting it there. Didn't remember walking to the door. But she was turning it. The lock clicked. The door began to open. And the last thing Sarah saw before the screen went dark was a final message appearing on her phone, glowing in the dim light of her apartment. I'll see you soon. Just like I always have. The police found her apartment empty 3 days later. No signs of struggle. No signs of entry. Just an open door, a phone on the floor with a dead battery, and a laptop still logged into a forum that, according to their investigation, didn't exist. The account SarahM_92 had been deleted. But if you search hard enough in the deepest corners of the web, you might still find it. Still active. Still posting. Still talking to user_4947. Every single night. She thought blocking him would be the end of it. For 3 days after she cut contact with the stranger from the forum, there was nothing. No messages. No notifications. Just silence. She started sleeping better. Started convincing herself it had all been some weird fluke. A lonely person online who got too attached too quickly. It happens. The internet is full of people like that. But on the 4th day, her phone buzzed during lunch. It was a message request on Instagram. From an account with no profile picture, no posts, just a string of random numbers for a username. She almost deleted it without looking. Almost. The message was simple. You changed your hair. Her stomach dropped. She had gotten a haircut 2 days ago. A spontaneous decision. She'd gone to a salon across town, one she'd never been to before. She hadn't posted about it. Hadn't mentioned it anywhere online. The only photo she'd taken was a quick mirror selfie she'd sent to her sister in a private message. Nobody else knew. She stared at the message for a long time, her sandwich forgotten on the table in front of her. Then she blocked the account, deleted the request, tried to forget about it. That night, another message came through. Different platform this time. Twitter. Another blank account. The blue jacket looks good on you. She was wearing a blue jacket. Right then. Sitting on her couch. She'd bought it last week from a thrift store and hadn't worn it outside yet. This was the first time she'd even put it on. Her hands started shaking as she checked the windows. All the curtains were drawn. They had been since she got home. She lived on the 3rd floor of an apartment building. Nobody could see in. Nobody should be able to see in. She blocked the account. Turned off her phone. Sat in the dark of her living room with her heart hammering against her ribs, trying to rationalize what was happening. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe someone had hacked her phone's camera. Maybe. Her laptop chimed from the bedroom. She didn't want to look. Every instinct told her not to look. But she walked to the bedroom anyway, each step feeling like moving through water, and she saw the Facebook message notification glowing on the screen. You shouldn't eat so late. It's bad for your digestion. She looked at the half-eaten bowl of ramen on her desk. She'd made it 20 minutes ago. At 11:30 at night. That's when the fear really set in. Not the surface-level anxiety of being watched, but something deeper. Something that made her skin feel too tight, and her thoughts move too fast and too slow at the same time. She called the police. They were polite but ultimately useless. They took a report, asked if she had an ex-boyfriend who might be stalking her, suggested she change her passwords and maybe stay with a friend for a few days. They said unless there was a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do about someone sending weird messages online. She stayed with her friend Marissa that week. Didn't tell her the real reason why, just said her apartment was having plumbing issues. She left her phone off most of the time. Only checked it once a day, and only in the morning when the sunlight made everything feel less suffocating. For 5 days, nothing happened. She started to relax again. Started to think maybe whoever it was had gotten bored and moved on. She went back to her apartment. Started sleeping in her own bed again. Then she went to the grocery store. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The store was nearly empty. She was picking out apples in the produce section when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She'd started keeping it on silent, but she felt the vibration. The message was from a new Instagram account. No profile picture. Random username. The Honeycrisp apples are sweeter. Her blood went cold. She was holding a Granny Smith apple, staring at the Honeycrisp display right next to it. She dropped the apple. It hit the floor and rolled under the display. She didn't pick it up. Her eyes scanned the store. An elderly woman comparing cereal boxes. A teenager with headphones in, stacking shelves. A man in a baseball cap near the deli counter with his back turned. Nobody was looking at her. Nobody was even near her. She left her cart in the middle of the aisle and walked out. Got in her car. Locked the doors. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could barely get the key in the ignition. Another message came through before she could drive away. Don't leave yet. You forgot the milk. Milk was on her list. Written on the Notes app in her phone. She hadn't told anyone she was going to the store. Hadn't posted about it. The note was private. Just for her. She drove home 20 miles over the speed limit and called a locksmith. Had her locks changed that same day. Covered her laptop camera with tape. Factory reset her phone. Changed every password to every account she had. For 2 weeks, nothing. She started to breathe again. Then she went to her therapy appointment. She'd been seeing Dr. Reeves for 3 years. Every other Thursday at 2 p.m. Same office building downtown, 4th floor, room 408. She'd never mentioned her therapist online. Never posted about going. It was private. Sacred, even. She was in the waiting room, flipping through an old magazine, when her phone buzzed. Dr. Reeves seems nice. Her vision blurred. The magazine slipped from her hands. She stood up so fast the receptionist looked over in concern. She didn't explain. Just walked out into the hallway, her breathing coming in short, sharp gasps. Another message. Room 408. 4th floor. You come here every other Thursday. She ran to the elevator. Pressed the button over and over, her whole body trembling. When the doors finally opened, she practically fell inside. Another message as the elevator descended. You're scared. I can tell. And then, you should be. She went straight to the police station from there. Showed them everything. All the messages. The timestamps. The details. Told them she was being stalked, that someone was following her, watching her, somehow tracking her every move. They took it more seriously this time. Opened an investigation. Asked for her devices to check for spyware or tracking software. They found nothing. No spyware. No stalkerware. No rational explanation. One of the detectives, a woman named Ortiz, suggested it might be someone close to her. Someone with access to her daily routine. A coworker. A neighbor. Maybe even a friend. But that didn't make sense. The messages were too immediate. Too precise. Nobody in her life could be everywhere she was, exactly when she was there, without her noticing. She started changing her routine. Went to different stores. Different coffee shops. Took different routes to work. Didn't tell anyone where she was going. Not even her closest friends. The messages kept coming. New coffee shop. Brave choice. That parking spot is too far from the entrance. Not safe. You walked past me today. You didn't even notice. That last one made her stop sleeping entirely. She'd lie in bed with the lights on, staring at the ceiling, wondering who she'd walked past. Wondering which face in the crowd was watching her. Studying her. Waiting. Detective Ortiz called her in after 3 weeks. Said they'd traced some of the accounts. Turns out they were all created from public Wi-Fi networks. Coffee shops. Libraries. Different locations all over the city. Whoever was doing this was careful. Smart. Knew how to stay anonymous. I need you to think, Ortiz said, her voice gentle but firm. Is there anyone from your past who might do this? An ex? Someone you rejected? Someone you had a falling out with? She'd thought about it 1,000 times already. There was no one. No angry ex. No rejected admirer. Just strangers on the internet and people she barely knew in real life. What about the person from the forum? Ortiz asked. The one you were talking to before this started. She'd almost forgotten about him. The strange man she'd met online. The one whose messages had felt too intense, too intimate. She'd mentioned him in her initial report, but the police hadn't been able to trace those accounts either. They'd been deleted. It could be him, she admitted. But I never told him anything personal. Never shared photos or details about my life. You'd be surprised what people can figure out from small details, Ortiz said. She thought about that conversation for days. Tried to remember everything she'd told the stranger. It wasn't much. Just general things. The state she lived in. Her favorite books. The fact that she liked rainy weather. But maybe that was enough. Maybe he'd pieced together her identity from tiny clues. Maybe he'd found her other social media accounts, even the private ones. Maybe he'd been following her this whole time, online and off, learning her patterns, her routines, her life. The thought made her sick. She stopped going out unless absolutely necessary. Groceries delivered. Therapy sessions switched to video calls. She worked from home, ordered everything online. Her world became smaller and smaller until it was just her apartment, her locked doors, her covered windows. But the messages didn't stop. They came every few days, sometimes every few hours, each one more specific than the last. You're losing weight. You should eat more. The nightmares are getting worse, aren't they? I miss our conversations. That last one felt like a confirmation. It was him. The stranger from the forum. It had to be. She tried to respond once. Sent a message back asking what he wanted, why he was doing this. The account was deactivated within minutes. No response. Just silence. Then, a week later, a new message from a new account. I just want to know you. She threw her phone across the room. Detective Ortiz called her less frequently as the weeks went on. The investigation had stalled. Without any physical threats or evidence of trespassing, there was little they could do. They suggested a restraining order, but you can't restrain someone you can't identify. She started looking into moving. Different city, different state. Somewhere far away where she could start over with a new name, new accounts, a new life. But before she could make any concrete plans, something changed. The messages stopped. Not gradually. All at once. One day they were constant, suffocating, inescapable. The next day, nothing. She waited for the relief to come, but it didn't. The silence was somehow worse than the messages. At least when he was messaging her, she knew where his attention was. Now she had no idea. Was he still watching? Still following? Or had he moved on to someone else? 3 months passed. Nothing. She started to reclaim her life. Slowly. Carefully. Started going outside again. Meeting friends. Living. Then, on a random Saturday morning, there was a knock at her door. She checked the peephole. A delivery man holding a small package. She didn't remember ordering anything, but that wasn't unusual. She'd been ordering a lot of things lately. She opened the door just enough to take the package. The delivery man smiled, handed it over, and left without a word. The package was light. No return address. Just her name printed on a plain white label. She should have thrown it away. Should have called the police. Should have done anything except open it. But she opened it. Inside was a USB drive and a small note written in neat, careful handwriting. I told you. I just want to know you. And now I do. Her hands went numb. She plugged the USB drive into her laptop with a sense of dreamlike dread, already knowing, somehow, what she would find. Folders. Dozens of them. Each one labeled with a date. She clicked on the most recent one. Photos. Hundreds of photos. Of her. Walking to her car. Sitting in coffee shops. Standing in grocery store aisles. Waiting in the therapist's office. Sleeping in her bed through the gap in her curtains she thought was too small to see through. Every moment of the last 6 months. Catalogued. Saved. Studied. She scrolled through them with tears streaming down her face, and at the very bottom of the folder was a video file. She didn't want to click it. Everything in her screamed not to click it. She clicked it. The video was dark and shaky, filmed from outside a window. Her window. Her bedroom. The timestamp was from last night. The camera slowly zoomed in through the gap in the curtains, focusing on her sleeping face. And then, from somewhere off camera, a voice. Barely a whisper. Distorted and soft. Sweet dreams. The video ended. She sat there in the dark, staring at the blank screen, her whole body numb with a terror so complete it felt like drowning. And then her phone buzzed one final time. See you soon. Sarah thought she was being careful. She really did. After that second conversation with the stranger on Discord, she'd changed her username, tightened her privacy settings, even avoided mentioning anything specific about where she lived. But the messages kept coming. Different accounts, always finding her somehow, always picking up right where they left off. At first, she told herself it was coincidence. The internet's a small place sometimes. People use VPNs, create new accounts, find ways around blocks. It happens. But there was something about the way this person wrote to her. Like they were enjoying a private joke she wasn't in on yet. The third account that contacted her had a blank profile picture and a username that was just a string of numbers. The message was short. Still ignoring me? Sarah stared at her screen, her stomach knotting. She hadn't told anyone about the previous messages. Not her friends, not her parents. She felt stupid for even entertaining the first conversation. And the second one had freaked her out enough that she'd convinced herself blocking would be the end of it. I don't know you, she typed back, her hands shaking slightly. Leave me alone. The reply came instantly. You do know me. You just don't remember yet. But I remember you, Sarah. I remember everything. Her real name. They'd used her real name. Her Discord didn't have her real name anywhere on it. She'd made sure of that. Sarah's throat went dry. She should have closed the app. Should have blocked the account immediately. But fear has a funny way of paralyzing you, and curiosity has a way of making you do stupid things. How do you know my name? 3 dots appeared, dancing on her screen for what felt like forever. I know a lot more than your name. I know you walk your dog every morning at 7:30. Black Lab, right? You always take the same route. Down Maple Street, left on Birchwood, then you cut through the park with the broken fountain. Sarah's blood went cold. That was her exact route. Every single morning. She looked around her bedroom as if the stranger might be hiding in the corner, watching her right now. Her hands were trembling so badly, she could barely hold her phone. "You're lying," she typed, but even as she sent it, she knew they weren't. "Am I? You passed that blue house with the garden gnomes. The old guy who lives there is always watering his roses. Then there's the yellow house on the corner, where that lady with too many cats watches you from her window. You probably think she's just nosy. She is. But so am I." Sarah felt tears pricking at her eyes. This wasn't someone guessing. This wasn't someone who'd looked up her general area online. This was someone who had been there. Someone who had watched her. "Stop," she typed. "This isn't funny. I'm not trying to be funny, Sarah. I'm trying to help you understand. You're not as invisible as you think you are. None of us are." She wanted to throw her phone across the room. She wanted to scream. Instead, she sat frozen, watching those 3 dots appear again. "You like to sit in your backyard on Tuesday evenings. Your mom makes spaghetti on Tuesdays, doesn't she? You eat dinner, then you go outside with your laptop and sit at that little table under the tree. The one with the chipped paint. You do your homework there when the weather's nice." It was all true. Every word. Sarah's chest felt tight, like she couldn't get enough air. How long had this person been watching her? How many times had they been close enough to see these things? "Who are you?" she typed, her vision blurring with tears. "What do you want from me? I want you to understand something important. Privacy is an illusion. Safety is an illusion. You think your house protects you. You think your locked doors and your parents and your little routines keep you safe. But I've been right there, Sarah. Close enough to touch you. And you never even noticed." Sarah's hands were shaking so violently she almost dropped her phone. She looked at her bedroom window. The curtains were drawn, but suddenly they didn't feel like enough. Nothing felt like enough. "You're scared now," the message continued. "Good. You should be. But here's the thing, the scariest thing of all. I'm not the only one watching you. There are others. So many others. We're everywhere, Sarah. In your neighborhood, in your school, in places you think are safe. We see everything. And most of you never even look up from your phones long enough to notice us." She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. She should tell someone. Her parents were right downstairs. She should run down there right now and show them everything. But shame kept her frozen in place. Shame and fear, and the horrible realization that this was real. "Please," she typed. "Please just leave me alone. I could. But would that change anything? Would you feel safe again? Would you ever walk your dog without wondering if I'm watching? Would you ever sit in your backyard without looking over your shoulder? I've already taken your peace, Sarah. I've already won." The 3 dots appeared again, and Sarah watched them with a sick, hollow feeling in her stomach. "One more thing before I go. That photo you posted last week. The one of you and your friends at the mall. You thought you were being smart by not tagging the location. But I recognized that food court. I was there that day, Sarah. I was sitting 3 tables away from you. I heard you laughing. I watched you take that picture. I was so close I could smell your perfume." Sarah dropped her phone like it had burned her. She backed away from it, pressing herself against her bedroom wall, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. But it was. Her phone buzzed on the floor where it had fallen. Once. Twice. 3 times. She didn't want to look. She didn't want to see what else this person had to say. But her eyes betrayed her, and she saw the screen light up with one final message. "Sweet dreams, Sarah. I'll see you in the morning. 7:30, right? Don't change your routine on my account. I'd hate to have to come find you. Then the account went offline. Deleted, probably. Gone like it had never existed at all. Except Sarah knew it had. She knew every word was real, every detail accurate, every threat genuine. She spent that night curled up in her bed, lights on, door locked, too terrified to sleep. She kept thinking about all the times she'd walked her dog, all the Tuesday evenings in the backyard, that day at the mall with her friends. Trying to remember faces. Trying to recall anyone who seemed out of place, anyone who watched too long. But that was the thing. The person who sent those messages was right. We never notice. We walk through our lives assuming we're safe, assuming we're anonymous, assuming that the strangers around us are just background noise in our own stories. We never think we might be the main character in someone else's much darker tale. Sarah never found out who sent those messages. The account was gone. The police couldn't trace it. Her parents installed security cameras and changed their routines, but the damage was done. Because Sarah understood now, in a way she never had before, that privacy was an illusion. That there were people out there watching, waiting, collecting details about lives that weren't their own. And the scariest part? The person who messaged her was right about something else too. They weren't the only one. In a world where everyone has a camera, where every moment can be documented and stored and studied, we're all being watched. Most of the time, it's harmless. Data collection, targeted ads, the background noise of modern life. But sometimes, just sometimes, someone is watching with purpose. Someone is collecting those details, learning those routines, getting closer and closer until the distance between online and real life disappears completely. Sarah still walks her dog every morning. She had to. Life goes on, even when you're afraid. But she never takes the same route twice anymore. She looks over her shoulder constantly. She sees threats in every stranger's face. And late at night, when she's alone in her room, she sometimes wonders if they're still out there. Still watching. Still waiting. Because the truth is, she'll never really know. None of us will. And that might be the most terrifying thing of all. She almost opened the door that night. Almost. And that single moment of hesitation, that one flicker of doubt that made her pause with her hand on the doorknob, is probably the only reason she's still alive to tell this story. By the fourth week of messages, Sarah had stopped sleeping properly. The notifications had become relentless. Multiple times a day. Sometimes multiple times an hour. And each message felt like it was peeling back another layer of the safety she'd built around herself. The stranger knew things now. Things they shouldn't know. They knew her work schedule down to the minute. They knew which grocery store she preferred and what time she usually went. They knew about the small Italian restaurant 2 blocks from her apartment where she'd order takeout every Friday night. They knew the names of her coworkers, her favorite coffee order, the route she jogged on weekends. But it was the photograph that changed everything. It arrived on a Tuesday evening, just as the sun was setting. Sarah had been sitting on her couch, trying to distract herself with a book she couldn't focus on, when her phone vibrated. She almost didn't look, almost had the strength to ignore it. But that terrible compulsion, that need to know, made her reach for it. The image loaded slowly, line by line, like something from a nightmare taking shape. It was her apartment building. Her front door. But the angle was wrong. It wasn't taken from the street or the sidewalk. It was taken from directly across the hall, from the stairwell entrance. Close enough to read her apartment number. Close enough to touch. The message below it was simple. Soon. Sarah's hands trembled as she stood up, walked to her door, and checked the lock. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then she moved through her apartment, checking every window, every possible entry point. Everything was secure. Everything was locked. But she didn't feel safe. She felt like a prisoner in her own home. She called the police again. The same tired response. The same sympathetic, but ultimately useless advice. Change your number. Document everything. Let us know if they make a direct threat. But until then, there wasn't much they could do. Someone taking a photo outside an apartment building wasn't technically a crime. That night, Sarah didn't sleep at all. She sat in her living room with every light on, watching her door, listening to every sound in the hallway. Every footstep made her heart race. Every door opening or closing somewhere in the building sent adrenaline flooding through her veins. The messages continued through the night. Not words this time. Just photos. Her car in the parking garage. The coffee shop where she'd stopped that morning. The dry cleaners where she'd dropped off her clothes the day before. A catalog of her life, delivered hour by hour, like a stalker's scrapbook being compiled in real time. And then at 3 a.m, a message that made her blood run cold. I'm closer than you think. Sarah stared at those words until they blurred. Closer than you think. What did that mean? Were they in the building? On her floor? She got up and pressed her ear against the door, listening. Nothing. Just the ambient hum of the building at night. The distant sound of a television somewhere. The groan of old pipes. She checked her phone obsessively for the rest of the night, but no new messages came. The silence felt worse than the onslaught. At least when they were messaging, she knew where their attention was focused. This silence felt like the moment before something pounces. The next evening, everything came to a head. Sarah had just gotten home from work. She'd been exhausted, running on zero sleep and pure anxiety. She'd fumbled with her keys at the door, desperate to get inside, to lock herself in, to collapse. She'd made it 3 steps into her apartment when she heard it. A knock. Not on her door. On the door directly across the hall. Sarah froze. Her apartment building wasn't particularly social. People kept to themselves. She'd lived there for 2 years and had maybe spoken to her neighbors a handful of times. Unexpected knocks were rare, especially at this hour. She heard the door across the hall open. Heard her neighbor's voice, an older woman named Mrs. Chun. Can I help you? And then a man's voice. Soft. Almost gentle. I'm looking for someone. Young woman, dark hair, lives on this floor. I'm an old friend, trying to reconnect. I think I have the wrong apartment number, though. Sarah's heart stopped. She moved toward her door silently, carefully, like any sound might give her away. She looked through the peephole. A man stood in the hallway. Average height, average build. Dark jacket. Baseball cap pulled low. He was holding his phone, showing Mrs. Chun something on the screen. From Sarah's angle, she couldn't see his face clearly, but she could see Mrs. Chen's expression shift from friendly to uncertain. I don't know, Mrs. Chen was saying. I don't really keep track of my neighbors. It's okay, the man said, his voice still soft, still pleasant. I just thought maybe you'd seen her. Dark hair, mid-20s, usually gets home around 6. That description. That schedule. He was describing her. Sarah's hand moved to her door lock, checking it again. Checked. Definitely checked. She held her breath, not daring to move away from the peephole. Mrs. Chun was backing toward her doorway now. I'm sorry, I can't help you. Have a good night. She was shutting her door, clearly uncomfortable. The man stood there for a moment longer. Then slowly he turned and looked directly at Sarah's door. Sarah jerked back from the peephole like it had burned her. Had he seen her? Could he somehow know she was watching? She pressed herself against the wall next to the door, her heart hammering so hard she thought he might hear it through the wood. Silence. Long, terrible silence. Then footsteps. Moving toward her door. They stopped directly outside. Sarah could see his shadow in the gap beneath the door. He was right there. Right on the other side. Less than 2 inches of wood between them. A soft sound. Was he smelling the door? No. He was listening. Trying to hear if someone was inside. Sarah didn't breathe. Didn't move. Every muscle in her body was locked up, frozen in pure terror. In her pocket, her phone began to vibrate. A message. But she couldn't move to check it. Couldn't make a sound. The shadow shifted. And then, impossibly, her doorknob began to turn. Slowly. Testing. Checking if it was locked. It rattled against the deadbolt. Once. Twice. The sound seemed deafening in the silence. Sarah's mind was screaming at her to do something. Call the police. Scream. Run. But she couldn't move. She was paralyzed, watching that doorknob twist back and forth, knowing that this person, this stranger who'd been tormenting her for weeks, was right there, trying to get in. Then the doorknob stopped moving. The shadow remained for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. And then footsteps. Moving away. growing fainter. Sarah waited 5 full minutes before she moved. When she finally pulled out her phone, her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. The message that had come through was from them. Next time, answer when I knock. Next time. They'd been there. They'd tried her door. And they were promising to come back. Sarah called 911. This time, she didn't care that they'd tell her to document it. This time, she was screaming into the phone that someone had just tried to break into her apartment. That she was being stalked. That she needed help now. The police came. They took her statement. They checked the hallway security cameras, but conveniently, they'd been out of order for the past 3 days. Building maintenance issue, the landlord said. They were working on it. The officers searched the building. Found nothing. No sign of anyone matching the description. They told Sarah what she already knew, that she should stay somewhere else for a few days. Stay with friends. Stay with family. Don't be alone. But here's the thing that still haunts her. The thing that makes her wake up in cold sweats even now, months later, living in a new city with a new number and new locks and a security system. When the police were leaving, one of the officers pulled her aside. He was older, looked tired, like he'd seen too much. He asked her to describe the man in the hallway again. She did. Average height, dark jacket, baseball cap. The officer's expression went very still. He asked if she'd gotten a good look at his face. No, she admitted. The cap and the angle through the peephole. That's probably good, the officer said quietly. He glanced at his partner, who was talking to the landlord down the hall, making sure he was out of earshot. Then he looked back at Sarah. I shouldn't tell you this, but there's been 3 missing women in this area over the past 18 months. All your age. All lived alone. All disappeared from their apartments with no sign of forced entry. Sarah's blood turned to ice. What are you saying? I'm saying you got lucky tonight. That door being locked, you not answering, that might have saved your life. He handed her his card. If you see him again, you call me directly. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Just call. Sarah moved out the next day. Crashed with her sister across town, eventually relocated to a different state entirely. She changed her number, deleted all her social media, started completely over. But sometimes, late at night, she thinks about that moment. Her hand on the doorknob, hearing that knock. For just a split second, she'd almost opened it. Almost called out to ask who was there. Almost turned the lock and pulled the door open without thinking, the way you do when you're tired and stressed and not expecting danger on the other side. She almost opened the door. And if she had, she absolutely knows that she wouldn't be here now. That she'd be one more missing woman on a detective's board. One more unsolved disappearance. One more family wondering what happened. She got a message the day she moved to her new apartment in the new state. From a blocked number. Just 2 words. Found you. But nothing came after that. No photos. No more messages. Just silence. Sarah doesn't know if that means he got bored. If he moved on to someone else. Or if he's just waiting. Patient. Watching from a distance. Biding his time until the next almost encounter. She triple-checks her locks now. Every night. Sometimes 4 times. 5 times. However many it takes to feel safe, which is never really safe enough. Because she knows how close she came. She knows that somewhere out there, someone who wanted to hurt her, who tried to get into her apartment, who tried to open her door, got away with it, is still out there. Still looking for unlocked doors. Still knocking. Still waiting for someone to answer. The messages didn't stop after Emma blocked him. They found new ways in. 3 days had passed since she'd shut down the account, deleted the app, and tried to convince herself it was over. But on Wednesday morning, she woke up to an email. No subject line. Just a video file attached. Her hands were shaking as she opened it. The footage was grainy, shot from a distance through what looked like a window. It showed her bedroom. Her actual bedroom. The timestamp in the corner read 2:47 a.m. last night. In the video, she was asleep in her bed, her face barely visible in the dim glow of her phone charger. The camera held steady for nearly 30 seconds before the footage cut to black. Emma dropped her phone like it had burned her. She called the police that morning. 2 officers showed up around noon, a man and a woman, both looking tired and skeptical. They took her statement, examined the email, asked the usual questions. Had she noticed anyone following her? Any recent break-ins? Strange activity in the neighborhood? No. 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 They told her they'd file a report. Told her to keep her doors locked. Told her to reach out if anything else happened. Then they left. Emma sat alone in her apartment for the rest of the day, every sound making her flinch. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant murmur of traffic outside. Everything felt wrong. By evening, she couldn't take it anymore. She called her older brother, Derek. He lived 2 hours away, but he didn't hesitate. He told her to pack a bag, and that he'd be there by 9. While she waited, she went through her apartment room by room, checking windows, locks, closets. Everything was secure. Nothing out of place. But that didn't stop the crawling sensation on the back of her neck, the feeling that she was being watched even now. Her phone buzzed. Another email. This time the subject line read, "You shouldn't have ignored me." Emma's stomach dropped. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single photograph. It showed her, standing in her living room, holding her phone. The picture had been taken from outside her window. Just minutes ago. She spun around, eyes darting to the glass. The curtains were drawn, but not completely. There was a gap just wide enough. Emma ran to the window and yanked the curtains shut, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She grabbed her keys, her bag, and locked herself in the bathroom. The only room with no windows. She texted Derek, "Hurry. Please." Then she dialed 911. The operator was calm, professional. She told Emma to stay where she was, that officers were on the way. Emma sat on the cold tile floor, her back pressed against the bathtub, listening to every sound in the apartment. Footsteps. Faint. Slow. Just outside the bathroom door. Emma's blood turned to ice. "Hello," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The footsteps stopped. Then a voice. Quiet. Familiar. "You really should have just talked to me, Emma." It was him. The stranger. He was inside. Emma screamed, scrambling backward as the bathroom door handle began to turn. It was locked, but that didn't matter. The door shook as something heavy slammed against it once, twice. On the third hit, the frame splintered. The door swung open, and Emma finally saw him. He was younger than she'd imagined. Mid-20s, maybe. Pale skin, dark hair, eyes that looked hollow and wrong. He was wearing a black hoodie and jeans, his hands shoved casually into his pockets like he'd just stopped by to say hello. But it was his smile that made her stomach turn. Soft. Almost sad. "I didn't want it to be like this," he said quietly. Emma pressed herself against the wall, her voice breaking. "Who are you?" He tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "You really don't remember me, do you?" Emma shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know you. I've never met you." His expression darkened. "Yes, you have." He pulled out his phone, swiped a few times, then held it up so she could see the screen. It was a photograph. Old. Faded. Taken at least 10 years ago. It showed a group of teenagers at what looked like a summer camp. Emma recognized herself immediately. She was 14, braces still on, standing in the back row with a group of other kids. And there, in the front, smiling awkwardly at the camera, was him. "Camp Pinewood," he said softly. 2012. You were in cabin 7. I was in cabin 4. Emma's mind raced, fragments of memory flickering to life. She'd gone to that camp once, years ago. A church thing her parents had signed her up for. She barely remembered it. I don't. You don't remember," he finished for her, his voice flat. "Of course you don't. Why would you? I was nobody. Just another weird kid everyone ignored." His hands clenched into fists. "But I remembered you. I remembered everything. The way you smiled when you played volleyball. The way you laughed at the campfire. The way you looked at me once, just once, and actually said hi." Emma felt sick. "That was 13 years ago," she whispered. "We were kids." "I know," he said. "And I waited. I thought, maybe one day I'd see you again. Maybe we'd reconnect. Maybe you'd remember me." He stepped closer. But you didn't. So I had to find you myself. Emma's voice cracked. You've been watching me. For how long? Long enough. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Derek. 2 minutes away. The stranger's eyes flicked to her phone, then back to her face. You called someone, he said quietly. Emma didn't answer. His expression shifted, something cold settling over his features. You shouldn't have done that. Before Emma could move, he lunged. She screamed, throwing herself to the side as his hands reached for her. She stumbled into the hallway, her legs barely holding her up, and ran for the front door. Behind her, she could hear him, calm, steady footsteps, like he had all the time in the world. Emma's fingers fumbled with the lock, her vision blurring with tears. She finally yanked the door open and burst into the hallway just as Derek came running up the stairs. Emma! She collapsed into his arms, sobbing, as he pulled her back toward the stairwell. The stranger appeared in the doorway, watching them. He didn't chase, didn't shout, just stood there, hands in his pockets, that sad smile still on his face. I'll see you soon, Emma, he called after them. Then he turned and disappeared back into the apartment. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. The apartment was empty. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints. Nothing. Just an email account that no longer existed and a phone number that led nowhere. Emma moved in with Derek the next day. She deleted every social media account she had, changed her number, started seeing a therapist. But every now and then, she still gets messages. Different accounts. Different numbers. Always the same words. I'm still here. Because some people don't let go. And some encounters were never random to begin with. If this story left you unsettled, you're not alone. Drop a comment below and tell us. Have you ever had an online interaction that felt just a little too personal? A message from someone who seemed to know too much? We want to hear your story. And if you made it this far, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because the internet is full of dark corners. And we're just getting started. Stay safe out there.